The game that we're about to talk about is my kind of unequivocal favorite game of all time.
I'm going to reveal what the canceled Donkey Kong Country 2 episode of Really Freaking Clever was going to be.
I think it's David Wise's best, and that's saying something because obviously everything Wise does is insane.
There's still enemies in this game that seem designed for a heavier Kong, but there just flat out isn't one. You can't even unlock Donkey Kong later on.
I just think it would be the perfect time to bring back some Kremlings, and you can make new ones, make new Kremlings, and
What's your favorite game? Come on the show, let me pick your brain. We've all got favorite games. No takes too insane here on Your Fave Game.
Hey everybody, I'm your host Josh Busker, and welcome to another episode of Your Fave Game, the online talk show where we chat with some of the most creative people from across the internet and ask them the question on everybody's mind, what's your favorite game? Today we are joined by my fellow YouTuber Snowman Gaming, creator of the hit game design series called, fittingly enough, Good Game Design. How you doing today, my dude?
Hey, what's up? Good to see you. We're kind of OGs now, right? We've been in the YouTube game so long that
We've earned... Have we earned our senior citizens badges? Or
yeah,
something?
yeah. I know. I feel like we need a discount or something. Yeah.
Yeah, we've definitely earned that by this point. Just right off the bat, I'm going to apologize if I get a little bit sweaty during this recording. My area of Canada, we currently got a big old heat dome, which sounds like a Sonic level. But so we're gonna hope that the snowman does not melt.
Yeah. Well, I'll
Fingers
cool you
crossed.
down or something. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. You're the perfect guest for today.
Right.
So yeah, I guess we're just gonna hop right into it. And but before I ask the titular question, I'm gonna try something out. Was this a difficult question to answer? What's your favorite game?
Honestly, no. I think the game that we're about to talk about is my kind of unequivocal favorite game of all time. And I think the only hesitancy I had was in case someone else had already picked it or something, for another guest or something, because it's a relatively popular game, but it's one that, yeah, I mean, I have other favorites, but this is the top of the top for sure.
Nice. I'm excited about that. And yeah, I've actually been trying to think a little bit about what I'm gonna do once people start picking the same game, because
Right.
there is some of these where they're really popular, so a lot of people are gonna think of them. But I also think that everyone's gonna have a slightly different reason for it being their favorite, or a bit more of a personal connection. So
Totally.
even if there is a little bit of crossover there, I think that'll still be cool. But yeah, that being said, this is your number one favorite game. What is that game?
That game is Donkey Kong Country 2.
Ooh. Wait, Diddy's Conquest? Is that
Yeah,
what?
Diddy's Conquest, not Diddy Kong's Quest, because that's what everyone thinks it is, but it's a pun. Diddy's Conquest.
Yes. I was trying to make sure I wasn't mixing it up, because the third game subtitle is Dixie's Double Trouble or something, but I always jumble those a little bit.
Actually, that's funny that you bring up the third one, because that was the very first video of yours I've ever seen when you did a Really Freaking Clever on DKC3
Wow.
way back in the day. And that's what kind of brought me onto your content, which, speaking of good game design and game design related stuff, both of us had funny names for our things, which were
Yeah.
Really Freaking Clever and Good Game Design, just pretty basic stuff. But
The three-letter acronyms,
Yeah.
they're really key for the line of work that we do, I feel like.
GGD and RFC, but I loved that DKC3 one, because if I remember right, basically your whole point of why Donkey Kong Country 3 is Really Freaking Clever is just because they just came up with the most insane stuff and just threw everything at the wall, and it was they went ham on it, and 2 built on it, and then by the time they got to 3, it was they're just going, every level is a new insane concept.
I think the easiest way to put it is that Donkey Kong Country 3 is probably in my top 5 favorite games. Ocarina
Yeah.
of Time has that top spot, but I have a really soft spot for Donkey Kong Country 3. I feel like I've even grown more fond of that game even since that video got made.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting, because part of the reason that I like Donkey Kong Country 3 so much, and it's a personal favorite, is that I feel like with Donkey Kong Country 2, they made the best Donkey Kong game. And then because of that, they had free reign to go extra crazy and wild with number 3. And that's why it's my personal favorite. But I'm really excited to talk about Donkey Kong Country 2 today, because, yeah, I also agree that they nailed that one. That
Mhm,
is an
mhm.
incredible video game. So I'm really excited to get into it. Um, so starting off, kind of is there a specific reason that it's an automatic favorite game for you, or do you have like a history with it? Or
I have history with the whole with the trilogy on Super Nintendo. I mean, like one of my first ever gaming memories is the first Donkey Kong Country with my dad and like playing that one a lot. And then we had the second and the third. So really, the whole trilogy as a whole. But as I've gotten older and especially starting YouTube and everything, and just seeing what's in all three of those games, what you were just saying, two is like just the perfect combination. The first game, Donkey Kong Country 1, obviously like groundbreaking, and it's the most popular and the one that most people know and stuff, but to me feels a lot more simplistic. It's a lot more just, oh, you're running through the jungle, and like it's what makes
Mhm,
sense as the first game. It's you're an ape in the jungle and you're going around different levels, treetops. But two, it's like, let's expand. They started dipping their toes in the crazy stuff that they do in three, like the roller coaster levels and the theme park and stuff. So it's like
mhm,
they started adding some wacky stuff. And then three, I'm with you actually. I like three as well, more than most people. Most people write off three as kind of the black sheep a little bit, but you
mhm,
really see the progression in three of where they go to DK64, because it's like the start of them adding in like collectibles in the open world, and you're going around the map and you're getting all the other stuff for the bears and the, you know what I mean, like all the extra stuff they
mhm.
add in. You really see a progression.
Almost too much stuff going on, but it makes it feel like so
And
much
I think
bigger.
that's,
Yeah.
most people think it's too much, but right, you just see the progression, right? So 2 for
Mhm,
sure hit the sweet spot. It's right in the middle where they're adding a whole lot, a lot of stuff compared to the original, but it's like it's not quite to the where some people get turned off where it's too much. It's like just right, hit the sweet spot.
mhm. Yeah, sweet spot's a really good way to put it. And Donkey Kong Country 2 is such an interesting sequel because it really is a bit of a pivot from the first game. Because the first game, as you said, it leans really heavily into the you're going through the jungle. But even whenever it gets to some of the like wackier kind of level themes, like you're going through temples or you have like the
Yeah.
factories and like the mine shafts by the end, it's all still like kind of very natural looking environments. They're really leaning into like those realistic graphics for the time, the like CGI then turned into sprites, and they were leaning into kind of how realistic they could make everything look. And then Donkey Kong Country 2 happens, and they're like, well, we had a pirate ship at the end of the
Yeah.
last one. First world, we're going complete committal to the
Yeah.
pirate theme, and then it just gets crazier from there. Like actually, not to put in my favorite things about Donkey Kong Country 2,
No, I want to hear yours too, because I know you're like a fan of the series too, so for sure.
the fact that they fully commit that the second world is just filled with lava. I love lava levels in games, but
Yeah.
usually you need to wait till like the very end. Like you need to wait for
That's true.
Bowser's
That's like
world to get
World
to
8
that
in
stuff.
Mario, right?
Yeah, but they're just like, no, this is world 2. We'll have it's one of the only games with like easier lava levels,
Yeah.
and I just love how much they commit to like the wide variety and kind of aesthetics and everything right off the bat.
Mhm.
I have always really enjoyed that.
Well, you made a really good point, which I don't know that I ever made this connection, but you're right that in DKC 1, they're going for that realistic for sure. Where I feel like
Mhm,
2, they're able to add more personality. It's maybe a little more cartoony, or just they're adding more of that Rareware charm stuff rather than we're just going
mhm.
strictly realistic. And maybe that's why for me, you just feel the personality come out more, because I agree completely.
I think it's a really big case of like Rareware is kind of figuring out their own personality as a studio
Yeah.
too. Because I would say that a lot of that cartoony, the focus on like roller coasters and minecarts and everything, they would even bring that attitude and kind of the quirkiness and cartooniness to like Banjo Kazooie and everything,
Yeah.
not just their future Donkey Kong games.
Yep.
And yeah, it really really stands out, and I think that's one of the reasons that I kind of prefer Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3 compared to the first one, is just that little bit of added personality adds so much. There's a little bit of that in the first game. Like Funky Kong and Candy Kong have
Yeah.
pretty like out there designs and everything,
Yeah.
but they fully embrace that by the second game. And everything's kind of taken up to that level. And I think that's overall to the series' benefit.
Well, like the Kremlings in general, right? They're just the baddies you jump on in the first game. Like there's not much explored. I mean, they're in armor, so definitely what you're saying is like they're weird, but
Mhm.
like the fact that there's a theme park for the Kremlings on their homeworld called Kremland, and they're
Yeah.
riding roller coasters and racing and stuff. Like you start to get to know them better. It feels like you know their personalities and you know what they like, and I don't know.
Mhm.
You get a different perspective, and that's another thing, right? Is that it's on the enemy's island now instead of Donkey Kong Island. So like, there's a
Yeah.
lot of different. I mean, yeah, it's just that perfect spot of just like, okay, we're gonna explore what like their world's like.
And I will say this isn't the reason that Donkey Kong Country 3 is my favorite, but I have always appreciated that for the third game they're like, and now this one, even wackier, is the Northern Cremisphere. So they're basically in the Donkey Kong version of Canada, is the way
Right,
I've always seen it.
right.
They so I appreciate that.
Yep. Yeah, that's that's funny. And the K3 red is like the mountain instead of K2. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Um and yeah, the whole progression of the trilogy is really, really interesting. And I'm trying to think of a way to like smoothly segue this, but I'm gonna reveal what the canceled Donkey Kong Country 2 episode of Really Freaking Clever was gonna
Oh,
be.
nice. There you go.
That was one that years ago I kind of toyed around with, or I knew what the clever thing I wanted to highlight was, but I was never able to like kind of get the full script around it.
Mhm.
But just because we're talking about the trilogy as a whole, I love how much they commit to Donkey Kong not being in the second game.
Yeah.
It's a really weird choice that in the Donkey Kong Country trilogy, Donkey Kong is only playable in one of the three.
Right.
And on the surface, that does just seem like kind of a gimmick where like, okay, we'll have like new characters for the duo. But I really like the way that they actually kind of make you feel in Donkey Kong Country 2 that there's an alternate version of the game where you did have like one of the heavier Kongs with you.
Mm.
Because that the way the trilogy works is first game, you've got Donkey Kong, the heavy Kong,
Mhm.
and Diddy Kong, the lighter Kong. And then Donkey Kong Country 2, you have Diddy Kong, the lighter Kong, and Dixie Kong, who is also a lighter Kong, but she's able to do the glide, and Dixie Kong is the best. Love
Right.
my girl. My girl. I love
Agreed.
it. And then Donkey Kong Country 3 brings it back where Dixie Kong's the lighter Kong and Kiddy Kong is basically our Donkey
Yeah,
Kong
heavier.
replacement. And the second game where they both have the lighter ones, there's like a bunch of enemies where you can't jump on them. Like
Mhm.
the big blue dudes that
Mhm.
get angry.
Yeah.
Like in Donkey Kong Country 1, you could just jump on them with Donkey Kong and you knew like the difference kind of between your two characters. But with the second game, you only have the lighter characters,
Yeah.
and they kind of make that a gameplay mechanic that like, oh, we need to get Donkey Kong back because there's a bunch of enemies that would be
Mm.
easier to tackle if you still had this thing from the last game, and that will be reintroduced in the next game. And maybe I just noticed that more because my order of playing the games was Donkey Kong Country 3, 1, and then 2.
Oh, man.
Um, which is a really interesting order to play
Yeah.
them. But that always stuck out to me that like there's still enemies in this game that seem designed for a heavier Kong, but there just flat out isn't one. You can't even like unlock like Donkey Kong later on. And just something about that adds a feel to it that it's a little bit like, oh yeah, we got to rescue the actual hero. But also our platforming adventure is apparently going to be the best one, which is just
Well,
funny
the
that
the reason that is really freaking clever is because then it makes you explore the environment and find new ways to take those guys down, right? So instead of hey, how's your cat? Um, instead of
uh,
like just jumping on them, like you're saying, you got to find the barrel and then take them out, or with Dixie, fly over top of them. Like there's new ways to explore and go around them instead of. So like there's still ways to get past them. It's just not as simple as jumping on them anymore. You got to find new ways to do it, and that is just
yeah.
genius.
Okay, this is actually all right. He's got food, so
Nice.
he should be good. We have 3 cats in the house. If it was any of the other 2 cats, they'd be fine to just sit and chill. But he's one that's gonna start meowing directly into the microphone.
Yeah, he's getting nosy. I was just saying they wanted to talk about Donkey Kong Country too. I get it.
What were we just saying?
You're saying like the bigger enemies so there's new ways to go around them instead of just jumping on them because you got the 2 small guys. And what's also nice about the smaller Kongs is everything feels a lot more faster and fluid, right? In the
Mhm.
first game and in the third game, it's like, well, I'm always going to play as Dixie or I'm always going to play as Diddy because Donkey Kong and Kitty are slow and they're like more cumbersome. Where now
Mhm.
both are great options. Like Diddy's fast on the ropes and Dixie can fly over everything. So they're like both really good options.
Yeah, they feel so much speedier, and that's like I'd say that's actually the strength of the trilogy is whenever you get in that really good flow state of just moving really quickly, cartwheeling right off the edge of something, jumping like a second after you've cartwheeled, and just that whole flow. Yeah, Diddy and Dixie are definitely the characters that kind of make that flow state like feel the absolute best.
Yeah. Yeah, they're just it's good, and that so like my history with that of obviously like I grew up with it, but once I started YouTube, I started speedrunning it. I actually speedran both the
Mm.
first game and the second game, one and two, and one is like a really easy speed game to get into. I feel like it's a pretty like entry level speed game. So if anyone's looking to like start speedrunning, I recommend DKC one. And two was like daunting to me because there's a lot of like wrong warps and weird stuff like that. But two just feels so good. The flow is just unbelievable with DKC two. Like every every level just feels great to run through and speed through. So, and that's that part of that's because of the characters.
Yeah. I was playing a little bit of the game last night actually, kind of to prep for this
Yeah.
conversation, and it is crazy just how easy it is to slip back into that game. Like
Hmm.
might be the series that is just easiest to pick up and play,
Hmm.
and immediately you're 8 years old again
Hmm.
just playing it. You memorize all the muscle memory, exactly how long
Yeah.
like you can go before like falling off an edge when you're able to jump again. Like just you internalize it so strongly because the game feels just so good.
And you know what? Like a lot of other platformers don't have that stuff. The roll cartwheeling, but then you preserve your jump kind of thing. Like that's pretty
Hmm.
unique to the series. So that's another thing that just like you're saying, you remember that and you just feels good. Feels good to do.
And I'm gonna say something controversial, and it's just a personal thing. I'm not saying this in general, but for me, like Donkey Kong Country games move so much better than like Sonic games. Like I know, like that's a lot of the intended goal for Sonic is to know the momentum and know everything that you can just perfectly like flow state from bit to bit. But Donkey Kong's always been the series that's really clicked with that for me the most.
Hmm. Well, like, so one of my favorite levels in the whole game is Ghostly Grove, which is that one with the ghost ropes that disappear and reappear.
Yes,
And
yes.
and first of all, speaking of like, talk about a gimmick that they use for one level and then throw away and never bring back. Like that's they also, I
Yeah.
guess, did that in two, right, where they just throw crazy stuff at the wall. Um,
Yeah.
but that level specifically is one of my favorite to speed run because everything just flows perfectly. You just the way you're jumping off the ropes and all those like SNES era games did this where the enemies only load in once you get close to them, right? So like it's
Mhm.
not like a global timer where they're always walking around. It's like they only load once they get close enough off screen. And
Mhm.
so the way that plays out every time you play the level is just perfect flow where just the guys are in the exact right spot where you need to be when to get through them fast. And so that level is like the perfect encapsulation of how fast you can just go through that game. Perfect flow.
I really like that's my favorite thing about Donkey Kong Country 3 is that basically every level in that game is just a gimmick level.
Yeah.
But even with Donkey Kong Country 2, like there is a sizable amount of levels where they're like, this is a really cool gimmick. We're gonna build the entire level just around that and then super rarely reuse it. And I kind of like how much identity that brings just to a specific, like you said, the ghost rope level, and I immediately know like specifically which one you're talking about. I don't have to be like, oh, is it the easier one, like early or
Right.
on, or whenever they like do a twist on it later? Because that's more than like Mario with Nintendo
Sure.
was they'll introduce a concept and then they'll
Mm,
bring it back in a more advanced form.
yeah.
But with like Donkey Kong Country, they're jamming everything they can into just that one
As
stage.
much as possible, and they do that. Like the you were talking about lava levels, the one with the hot air balloons. Like I
Yes.
think that's the only one that uses that, and it's just like let's just throw everything we possibly can in that level and then move on.
Yeah. It's a really good outlook. And I think it's why like all those levels are so memorable. And just that the game's able to hop from so many unique things to unique things that it's very rare that they even like reuse an aesthetic or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, they're right. There's the certain types of levels, like a B level, there's like 3 of them or something like that, but even within
Mhm.
those ones, there's unique things to each of those.
Yeah,
Like
like
the
one's gonna be the one where they'd run with Rambi at the end of
exactly,
it,
I was
and
just gonna say
one's
when you're chased by the bee, so, like, yeah, so and that honestly, that's a big series identifier, I think, because think about like Tropical Freeze. I feel the same way about those levels where each one has boom. That's its identifier of that level. Like they do a really good
Mhm.
job of giving each level its own time to breathe and then moving on.
Yeah. Oh, I could talk forever about Tropical Freeze. I absolutely love that game as well.
So good.
I'm actually really happy that they just announced that they're doing the original
I know I just
returns
saw that.
for the Switch.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, we're coming in topical off of the
Yes,
Nintendo
yes,
Direct,
right off the,
depending on when this
direct, I know.
episode comes
Yeah,
out.
that was I was talking about that because, with a friend because, I love Returns also. Returns is also a very, very good game, but I think the motion controls and the Wiimote stuff, like, turns off some people to it, but, like,
Mhm.
having a proper Switch thing with regular controls will just be, like, so good for that game because Returns is also kind of underrated a little bit.
Yeah, that's one that I haven't played since the Wii era. So I'm very interested to replay it and see
Mhm.
how it holds up compared to Tropical Freeze, because that's one I've replayed a bunch and just I love how inventive that game is. I keep talking about just my favorite worlds in video games, but the I think it's the fifth world that's just the jungle that turns into a fruit
Yeah,
factory that turns into fruit juice,
so
and
good.
then you have like them freezing the fruit juice. I love the theming. It's so good.
All to make a popsicle for the boss of the area. So good.
Yeah, it's so good. It's such like a nice little contained story.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, and they fixed it, the motion control stuff. They fixed it even for the original Tropical Freeze on Wii U. They just you map it to a button instead of shaking the Wiimote. And so
Mhm.
if it's that simple, like it should be perfect for Switch. They already obviously have Tropical Freeze on there too. So, because there's the things where you're like blowing the flowers and things like that, and so just having that on a button
Oh, yeah.
will be so much better. So I think it'd be really good on Switch for sure. So just the whole series is that way where it's like they just they each level gets its own love put into it, just making it its own, and that's what makes it just so enjoyable start to finish.
Yeah. I really like that. I like that it has its own identity gameplay wise compared to like Mario or Kirby or something, instead of
Mm,
just being, okay, it's another platformer and we just swap out like who the protagonist is, what their punch
right.
looks like, and things. Like it's very much the whole design like philosophy is this is what a Donkey Kong game is kind of like.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting about Mario too, right? Because Mario, it feels like the thing that changes game to game is maybe an overall thing about the whole game instead because they'll
Hmm.
still have the grass area and the desert area and a beach area, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
But like it'll be some overall changes. Maybe it's new power ups or Yoshi's back in this one or whatever. Where Donkey Kong Country feels like each game has its own unique identifiers about it that's different than you're not going to have the same type of level in 2 versus 3 or things like that. It's like
Hmm.
everything's totally different.
Yeah. And I actually think that Mario Bros. Wonder took a lot of kind of inspiration
Yeah.
from how Tropical
Right.
Freeze did things, and like levels changing over the course of it, or having like a little story that's going on while you're playing through it.
Yeah.
Because that's way more like traditional of the Donkey Kong Country games compared to what would usually happen in a 2D Mario level, at least. You could maybe it's more so them taking stuff from kind of like the Mario Odyssey direction, but
Mm.
yeah, I would say there's a bit more of a connection there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely the personality of it, like giving it its own personality and watching it all shine through. And totally, even playing Wonder, even if there was like a grass stage or whatever, it each one felt unique. The way they did with their Wonder Seeds made each stage have its own thing. So that was them
Hmm.
doing that totally. Yeah. And it
Yeah.
makes for a great game.
They saw my really freaking clever about how much I love gimmick levels, and we're like, let's make a Mario game just for
Here's a
Josh.
gimmick. Everything's gimmick. Yeah. Yeah. It's just so good. I don't know. Everything about it.
What gameplay wise do you think that that the second game does that's just better than the other two? That's like really like the most sweet spot hitting.
They do a really good job with vertical levels in the second game. They
Mm,
because you it's the one that introduces the team up toss. They do so much stuff vertically and like climbing the mine shafts up or things like that. And 3 has some vertical stuff too, but it just feels really tight and well designed where there's a big focus on that. And so there's a lot of climbing stages, but they don't feel like, you know, like intrusive or different. It just feels like you're doing the same stuff you would in any other level. You know, like
Mhm.
think climbing the mast, the very second level of the game, right? You're climbing up the mast. Um, and it just feels like any other regular stage. You don't even realize that it's like I'm going up instead of to the right.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of work must have went in because I've never even really considered that before. But yeah, you always kind of know what the right direction is to be going, even if like, yeah, those vertical levels, like you're going left to kind of get up to the next
Right.
spot to raise up again. But that still feels completely natural, just the way they've laid out the levels and kind of subtly guide you through them.
And they added all those different things to help with it. So there's the barrels that only work for the specific Kong, right? So there's like a
Mm,
Diddy barrel or the Dixie barrel. And so there's those, the hooks, like all the stuff that they add just to make more vertical stuff. And the
mhm.
ropes. I guess really any ropes in DKC one are just the swinging back and forth stuff, right? Or one that moves left to right.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the fact that they just have stationary ropes, and that's level design, is you're just climbing up. So there's a lot of that too, and so there's just a lot more. It feels expanded because it's like you're going up just as much as you're going right. It feels like in that game.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd never really clocked that before, but I think Donkey Kong Country 1 is like very much like all
Hmm.
horizontal and
Hmm.
everything. But like the most memorable parts of those games, at least to me, like is whenever you go through like a big swinging section or you have like here's 20 different barrels to blast out of in a row and
Right.
really kind of expanding on that into like, okay, well, you can go up with these and you might actually be exploring through like Bramble Blast and everything
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
going every which direction with these barrels
Yeah.
and figuring out that maze. It's just
Right. It's not
so
just to
well
the
done.
right or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. So I think my personal favorite aspect of the game actually is its bonuses and the stuff that unlocks with the bonus tokens and the like extra levels and all the
Mm.
bonus barrels and the all the mini games and stuff.
Everything that kind of makes you have to go back and makes the game less linear in a way.
Oh yeah, there's always something to explore around every corner, and like obviously it's not the only game to do that. Like Mario has secret exits sometimes or things like that, but
Mhm.
um I've seen a lot more games kind of take that aspect specifically and put it in their game of like I want to have a bonus here or like a collectible token there or a thing here. There's always something to find around a corner, and that's what I feel like DKC really kind of pioneered was like every corner there's like something behind a bush or something up that you got to climb to or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and the reason I love that stuff so much though is because of how it unlocks more levels when you find enough tokens. So if you explore enough and you're like, hey, I'm a devoted player, I'm loving this game that I'm going back and getting all the things. Hey, here's more game to play. Here's more like challenge levels for you to try. And
Mhm.
that's like to me, that's the like the chef kiss of any video game is like, okay, you're loving this experience enough to like go do the extra mile. Here's more, and here's like the next level. Like try this one, it's tougher. And that's like
Mhm.
it's just like serving it to you on a platter. That's what I love.
Yeah. I feel like Donkey Kong Country 2 was one of the first ones that super committed to that. And
Mhm.
that's almost like that's Nintendo's default kind of design philosophy now. Like the way the Mario Odyssey is structured, where you can roll credits on that game pretty easily. But then once you've done that, they're like, okay, and you still want to play? Here's the real meat of the game, and they add like
Right.
2/3 onto the game with new stars and everything like that. And I feel like Donkey Kong Country 2 just with the Lost World and everything. The way they did it was just so cool, and they put so much pizzazz into like because the Lost World is giant volcano. It's like mysterious. It doesn't quite look like any other place you visit
Mhm.
to. Even having like the dude Clubba, is that his name?
Yeah,
Um,
yes, Clubba.
like you have the most intimidating looking
Yeah.
crocodile that looks like one of the bosses in the game, like
Mhm.
guarding the place. Um, and then just how much pizzazz they even put into the bonus barrels themselves. Like Donkey Kong Country 1 already had, if you find a secret area, you get some really good music to listen to while you're
Yeah,
doing that
right,
little
right.
bonus area. But then with 2 and 3, they're like, okay, we're going to escalate that with the barrels explode whenever you're being launched to the bonus area. And we
Yeah,
have like the whole game show theme and telling you, like, this is
yeah.
what you got to do. And then the great music plays while you're doing that. It's such a blast. It makes you like, you're excited whenever you find a bonus thing.
And this is my like small nitpick with Returns and Tropical Freeze is they kind of dropped this where each one is unique. Each bonus barrel is specifically designed with a unique task. Yes, some of
Mhm.
them repeat like collect the stars or defeat all enemies, but each one is different, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a specific task. So in Returns Tropical Freeze, they have a lot of repeating rooms. Plus, you're just collecting bananas. That's it. Like it's just collect all the bananas, you get a puzzle piece.
Mhm.
In this, I mean, just the fact that each one is unique, that's part of what makes you want to find them all. Is like, I want to see what this one is, I want what that one is.
Yeah, it's part of the
It's so good.
individuality of the level.
Hmm. Yeah, and in one, totally, and that's also like the expansion from one, because one had the secret bonuses, which is great, but right, you get extra lives.
Yeah, you bounce around and get like 80 bananas. Yeah.
Right. So the reward, like, I mean, you get the percentage counter, but like the fact that they gave you a token and then it's like, here's now turn them in and here's your reward. Like that just to me, that it's for whatever reason, that's what like really clicked with me of like, oh, that's the best way to design a game ever is just like
Mhm.
the actual reward being worth it and that there's something more for you to play.
I can't remember now if they do. I know in Donkey Kong Country 3, they have the little like flag on the map will like tell you whether you got all
Hmm.
the bonus barrels, whether you got all the DK coins, and you can kind of see from a glance like, oh, there's still something to find in here.
Hmm.
I don't know if they make it as clear on the world map of Donkey Kong Country 2, or if it's just like in the name of the level, they put the little kind of icons next to them.
Yeah, so there's the exclamation point, which a lot of people didn't even know that. Like I remember mentioning that in a video one time, and all the comments were like, "The exclamation point means that you found all the bonus." They just thought it was like in the name, like just they put an
Oh, yeah.
exclamation point in the name of the level. But there's an exclamation point, which means you got all the bonuses. And then if you got the DK coin, it does show the DK coin next to it also. Which the flag is more elegant in 3. Like that's a better solution of how they have the yellow flag for the DK coin and then the flying flag for got all the bonuses,
Yeah.
which is
It's even
cool.
colored to tell you what Kong you had to like beat
Exactly.
in the level with.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was such a big incentive for replayability whenever I was a kid, because it was like, oh, there's still something in this level and I don't know
Yep.
what it is. And I guess I technically could have like looked it up on Game Facts, but that was a bit before that era, and so it was
Yep.
like I need to explore this entire level, figure out the secret.
I had the physical guide to DKC 3 as a kid. The like
Oh,
pull it
nice.
out, the player strategy guide. So I 103% it or whatever it is in that game, that through the guide as a kid, which talk about like another thing that yeah is just not what it is anymore today. But like I
Hmm.
had the actual guide and like it showed the full layout of the level and it had little like arrows and telling you where to find secrets and stuff. It was really cool.
Oh, yeah, all the strategy guides, like Nintendo Power and everything. It was so cool, so cool. All the art and everything.
Yeah. To me, it just feels like, and I'm sure it's obviously not the first game to do it, but for me at least, and my experience, like that was the first one for me that it's like, oh, that just design philosophy to me was so good. And then,
Hmm.
a secret boss fight, like a refight of K. Rool at the end too, once you 100% everything, it's like just the perfect cap off of the game. So
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I'm sure there's RPGs or stuff like that would have like a secret final boss or like an extra tough challenge. But for a platformer to kind of reward you in that way,
Hmm.
um, like I know Super Mario World has that bonus. Yeah, Super Mario World kind of has the Star World like bonus levels, but with that, the reward for it is more so just, oh, we changed all the sprites around. You can play through with
Right.
the Koopas have Mario's head as a shell
Change the
now.
color of the overworld.
Um, but
Yeah.
with Donkey Kong, it's legitimately like, no, that's how you properly beat the game and like actually beat K. Rool. In both Donkey Kong 2 and 3, they do that. Yeah.
That's right, and you get the little fancy ending. It's kind of like a secret ending, basically. It's funny how that all that stuff was so primitive back then. I mean, like you're right, Mario World has that bonus world stuff, but it's just different. It's not quite the same of how because a lot of games I feel like have done that now, where if you collect enough of this thing, it unlocks this.
Hmm.
That's kind of just a trope now, where like Mario World, it's like they were kind of flying by the seat of their pants. Like, okay, we'll have some secret exits along the way, and then they'll go to a Star World, and And then there will just be this row of like really hard levels, and then that's the secret stuff.
We'll name them all after 90s slang, and it'll be
Yeah,
great.
yeah, gnarly, and I know.
Groovy,
Wait,
yeah.
yeah, it's and so like obviously that's really cool, but you can tell like they're still figuring it out. Like games are so new, right? They're still just figuring
Mhm,
out what works well, and for some reason they just like unlocked the perfect piece of rewarding gameplay in DKC 2.
mhm. And all those bonus levels are really, really well done. They're a big step up in difficulty, compared to like the
Yeah.
regular games levels, but that's what you want, like if you're going through all the effort of getting these bonus coins. And that like the one in particular where it's the gauntlet of all the different animal buddies
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
is such a good like, all right, you've enjoyed this game, like,
yeah.
but have you mastered it? We are good. This is the test.
And to me, the best final level, right? Because so DKC 3, the final bonus one is the rocket ship level.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And and
Yep.
and that's the theming of DKC 3, which is we're gonna go crazy. Let's throw in this rocket ship, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of is hit or miss where it's like it's not great. Um,
Rocket Ship gets a teeny bit too gimmicky for me. I still love that game, but I will admit the Rocket Ships.
and it could have been done well. It's too fast to like react sometimes, and you got to kind of memorize it a little bit. Yeah, it's a silly idea,
If it was one of the earlier bonus levels and it was just
right?
like, oh cool, they've got a gimmick that they just have set aside for this secret
Right.
island world. But the fact it's like the final one is just a little bit of
Yeah. And Animal Antics is not like, some people rage quit that level too. Like it's
oh
ridiculous. The
yeah,
wind
I
with the
understand that.
squawks and
Yeah.
the wind and the brambles, like, dude, it's not perfect either, but you're right that I think the idea of it wasn't let's throw a random gimmick on this last level. It's like, have you mastered all the animal buddies? Like, let's do a level where you use every animal buddy because that hadn't been done in the game either. So
Mhm.
it's like a perfect cherry on top of the cake.
Yeah. And with the animal buddies in that game in general, they're usually like you might get like one or two levels a world that use the animal
Hmm.
buddies. They're
Hmm.
usually pretty spaced out, and then that last gauntlet is just it's like the
Yeah,
payoff to all that buildup. So good.
right. Yeah. What's your favorite animal buddy?
I think it's the spider.
Yeah,
Twitter, is that his
yeah.
name?
Squitter,
Yeah.
Squitter's good.
Just because like obviously being able to shoot and the both being able to shoot and being able to like angle those shots is so
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
But then just being able to make your own platformer or
Hmm.
being able to make your own platforms in a platformer that early on felt like mind exploding.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
that it feels really good. Um they do some really cool stuff with that mechanic in Donkey Kong Country 3 where you're just constantly having to make more and more platforms over like lava fields and pits of
Yeah.
acid and everything.
Yeah.
And I really, really enjoyed that.
That Squitter level in DKC 3 where there's the gun chasing you and or whatever, there's the
Yes.
reticle, and
Yeah.
whoever that is, whatever enemy is shooting you from
Yeah.
off screen, like crazy. Talk about like memorable level, right? Where it's the only one that uses that too. Like just so cool. Yeah. Yeah, Squitter, the fact that you can just go over everything on top of everything by making your own platforms, like that's
Mhm.
super like that's a lot of trust from the developers of like trusting in your game design to be like, I'm going to give you an ability that lets you just go over
You
everything,
can skip all this. Yeah.
but still make it worthwhile and fun to play and fun to use. Like, really good stuff.
Yeah. Who would your favorite animal buddy?
That's a good question. I mean, so I do love Squitter a lot. I think as a kid, I loved Ratley. And
Mm.
now, especially like in speedrunning, Ratley's like the least consistent guy because his hitbox is all weird. And sometimes the one where you're on the pirate ship as Ratley and it plays the K. Rool song,
Yes.
with the green background.
Yeah.
That level is like notorious for you get hit all the time because like the hitboxes are not great. But super fun to use, right? You're jumping high. You can like, he can jump on enemies. But honestly, like I think at the end of the day, like Rambi is always a solid choice, like just the mainstay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels like that might be like just too simple to say that one, but Rambi's always good. Although, I mean, maybe if we're only talking DKC two, but in DKC one, I do love Espresso as well, the bird, which
Yeah.
never came back, and like I wish we had Espresso. That's a good one.
I'm surprised they never brought them back for one of the Returns games or something like that.
Yeah,
Because it was one of those iconic, like, first game images of Donkey Kong riding an ostrich type
yeah,
thing.
and
Um,
that's another like pet peeve of mine. I think in the new ones is that they only have Rambi. Like
mhm.
they needed more animal buddies in there for sure.
Yeah, yeah, they're treating Rambi as if he was the only one. It's like, no, bring back my spider, bring back my bouncy snake.
And even on guard, which is the underwater uh, one. So the in Tropical Freeze, there's a whole world of underwater levels. Like World 4 is all underwater levels. I was like, oh,
Mhm.
surely they're going to bring back on guard, and then they didn't do that either. So it's like, man,
Yeah, yeah, a bit of
missed
a missed
opportunity.
opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think
Um,
the animal buddies add really good variety, so it's good.
like, it kinda leans into that every, level has a little bit of a gimmick type thing,
Yeah.
but because they reuse the animal buddies, that's another case. I guess that's a little bit of the case of slightly altering, like, okay, this is another spider level, but in this one, you really need to focus on kind of this aspect of the spider. It's more on shooting the enemies, whereas another
Hmm.
one might be based more on making platforms to get across or skipping the whole level if you feel like doing that.
Right. And Squawks too. I mean, now I feel like I'm just saying all the animal buddies, but like Squawks has
All
his
of
own
them are our
unique stuff
favorites.
too. Right. Yeah. I mean, really, like all of them have their own pros and cons. I think for sure.
Mhm. And just, yeah, being able to fully fly as Squawks, like, during the Bramble levels and everything is
Hmm.
it's so tense, like, it literally the beginning of people making Mario Maker levels where there's just spikes everywhere,
Yeah.
um, but it's so cool, and, of course, just we're we're YouTubers that have been doing this for years. We've heard the Bramble Blast music
Yeah.
thousands of times by this point, but it to this day remains a banger. Like, just incredible music in the game overall. But some specific tracks are just like, damn, you went so hard for a game about monkeys.
Yes. Yes. Speaking of like the thing we haven't talked about yet is the soundtrack. I mean, that's like
Mhm.
I think it's David Wise's best, and that's saying something because obviously everything Wise does is insane.
Mhm.
But that's like every level track is good. Like there's not one that I would skip on that. They're
Yeah.
all so good.
The opening to the game, replaying it last night just to again remind myself before going into this conversation, but just that you open on the pirate ship and you just have the
Yeah.
all naturalistic noises, and then it starts bringing back like the pirate music, and it just immediately feels so iconic. It's so well done, it's so mood setting, and it's crazy that they were doing stuff like ambiance and everything in a platformer like 10 years before 3D games would be trying to really like sell you a mood like that.
Right.
It's so cool.
Well, he was like the king of that in that I guess both games won as well, but um how he would use the sound effects basically as part of the music. So like bugs chirping in the forest, and that's part
Mhm.
of the or the lava bubbles popping and stuff, and that's just
Yes,
part of
yeah.
the it's part of the song, you know. Or the Minecraft mine shaft levels, which is that don't remember the name of the song off the top of my head, but the one like that one where it just sounds like all the
Do
Kremlings are
da da do
banging.
do da
Yeah,
do da. Yeah.
totally. Like they're like you picture them like pickaxing stuff in a mine shaft. It's just like talk about the whole music sets the mood and tone of each level. It's so
Mhm.
good.
I also really like how it transitions so cleanly from the ending of Donkey Kong Country 1. Might be one of my favorite final boss tracks
Yeah,
ever in that
yeah,
game. Just
absolutely.
masterpiece. And then taking that aesthetic and continuing with that right off the bat at the start of the second game. And like bringing that music back, but having it be like, oh, this is the fun level version of this
Hmm.
same theme instead of a final boss version. It's so good and just really a nice use of like motifs and keeping that kind of like the storyline going, even like music wise. And as I was saying, like gameplay wise, with the fact that, oh no, we're missing Donkey Kong now. Just they did a lot of cool stuff that really early on of making that game feel like it's in the same world and like directly connected to the first game, even though it's doing like way more cartoony things or like taking everything like 3 steps forward.
And both I didn't realize till you mentioned it, but both first levels, Jungle Japes and the first level in DKC 2, do that thing where it leads in of just sound effects, just some ambient music, and then it goes into the song. So it's kind of
Mhm.
doing the same thing again that it did in the first game there, which is just a nice.
I only realized this last night, but both Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2 open with you start up on kind of like a balcony thing, and then
Mm,
if you're replaying the game and you can just go to the right and like play through the level. But both games have you drop down and you go to the left, you get the story for what you're trying to
yep,
do. Because in the first
yep,
game, oh no, the banana horde's gone. And the second game, it's like the cabin of the pirate ship
yep,
with the note from King K. Rool that he's kidnapped
yep,
Donkey Kong,
yep.
and it's like literally the same layout, and I love that even though it's not the literal same location, that they kind of homage each other there. It's really
That's
good.
a good point. Yeah, there's a lot of little motifs and stuff like that. Um, I just love games that you can just jump right in and play immediately. Like Super Mario World's like that too, where it's just like I am playing the game within 10 seconds of booting up the game.
Hmm.
It's just boom, boom, go. And then if you want the story, you can go find it. Or obviously they had the manuals back then too, but
Hmm.
um, yeah, just hop right in. Yeah, it's just so easy to just jump in and play.
See how far into the level you can get before the music actually like starts
Right,
playing.
right, right. Yeah. Yeah, like a test of how fast I did it by the song for sure.
Can I outrun David Wise?
The second game was the first one that had the warp barrels too. So the first two
Yes.
worlds have the warp ones that warp you to the end of the level.
Hmm.
And I only really know this from speedrunning, but like you skip basically the first two worlds because you just do the warp barrel in every level. And so that was another new thing they added. They didn't have that in the first one.
This was years ago now, but there was at one point I watched like back-to-back speedruns of the whole trilogy. It was one
Yeah,
of the games done quick events,
yeah,
and there were so many warp barrels that I had no idea
yeah,
existed. Like
yeah.
went my entire childhood just never knowing that. Like I don't even think I knew that Donkey Kong Country 2 had like plentiful warp barrels. Like
Hmm.
I thought there was one or two, and then they like took that to multiple in the third game. But no,
Right.
apparently I just missed all the ones in Donkey Kong Country
I,
2.
I and same. I don't know that I even knew of any of them in two until I started speedrunning. But three, I found one by accident in the treetop level where you're climbing up the tree, and there's the spider springs.
Oh yeah.
There's the warp barrel there. I found by accident once, but like awesome. Like they just threw them in, and I don't know this for sure, but what I heard is they put those in for testing, like so the developers could get to the later levels easier. It's like a,
Mhm.
a testing thing, and then they just left them in.
That works really well because I'm sure it made their job easier than having to put in like a debug
Right.
code every time. But then
Yeah.
also, it's a really cool thing for, well, I'm sure they weren't even thinking of speedrunners, but just like gamers in general to figure out and like optimize the game. And oh, look at this. I can skip this whole thing.
It's also just a fun Easter egg. That's something that just it'd be like tell your buddies on the playground, like, oh, did you know you could skip this level? But
Exactly. Yeah. Just those little cheat codes and stuff like that were so
yeah,
there was so much more novelty to them, like back in the day whenever you couldn't immediately like see that stuff on the internet or anything either.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you might get hinted to at like the location of one, or that there is warp barrels in general in the instruction manual, but they weren't going to tell you where they all were unless you
right,
bought like an actual strategy guide or
right,
something additional.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. There's something about it. It's just an extra sweet spot in my heart. And that time, I mean, like obviously, right? It's going to be the era where we all grow up, and so it's ultra nostalgia for me, big time. Um, but like it still holds up. It still holds up incredibly well.
Yeah. No, I'm very much the same where Donkey Kong Country 3 was one of my first video games like for the Super Nintendo. And
Hmm.
so I think the fact that I played that first helps a lot with like why I'm so fond of it and why it's my favorite, like with all the gimmicky levels.
Hmm.
But I just the core gameplay is so strong in the whole trilogy
Hmm.
that they were really on to something special. And honestly like influenced so many games that have come afterwards, just them figuring all that stuff out. Even just storytelling through gameplay wise that early is just so impressive.
I don't know. I love it. I love it till the day I die.
So we talked a little bit about the Retro Studios games, and they're it's very impressive how much Retro Studios was kind of able to get that feeling of the original games and bring it across. Is there anything that you think those games don't quite live up to the originals with, or that you wish that they focused on a bit more?
Yeah. Uh, so kind of the thing that I think a lot of people find missing in the new ones is the Kremlings, or just kind of like bringing back
Mhm.
K. Rule in general, which now is even more so because K. Rule's in Smash now, which wasn't the case when Tropical Freeze came out. Like K.
Mhm.
Rule hadn't been in anything since, a long, long, long time. And so it feels like a pipe dream. But now if there ever is like a third retro one, or even just whatever the next Donkey Kong game would be, like I think the Kremlings would be a huge like win
Oh,
if they brought back the
yeah,
Kremlings.
that would be such an immediate win, whichever Nintendo Direct that got, like, revealed
Yeah,
in. Just
right,
everyone would
right.
be immediately over the moon. Even if you
Yeah,
just tease, like, King K. Rool at the end of the trailer, like,
right.
everyone would be so,
It,
so excited about that.
lose their mind. And I know Retro Studios wanted to make their own identity, and they kind of wanted to, make their own creations and stuff. Totally respect that. I
Mhm,
think like for a third one, right? Like just as a now would be like the perfect time to get a callback, and especially now that he's a little more relevant and stuff. I just
mhm.
think it would be the perfect time to bring back some Kremlings, and you can make new ones, make new Kremlings, and you
Well,
know,
that's what's so great about the Kremlings is you can do, like, a whole lot of new variants, like, they have such variety to them, and that's the appeal of them is just they have so many different crazy personalities, and they all share like that common aesthetic, but you really can do anything with them. You can make them pirates, you can make them ghosts, you can do whatever you want with them.
and King K. Rule specifically is so like Morpheus. He can be anything. In the
Mhm.
third game, he's a mad scientist. It makes no sense.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like he can be anything, and he's just like comedy. Like his character is just you know like he can be anything. Because in the first game he's a king, but it's on a pirate ship. In the second game he's a pirate, but he's on an airship. And then
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like it's just like it's in DK64. He's boxing gloves. Like it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Like he could be anything, whatever you want. I don't know if you've heard this. This was a thing by I don't know if you ever knew Jolly Goat back. And speaking of OG
Oh,
YouTubers,
that
like
sounds
way
so
back in the day,
familiar. Oh
Jolly Goat
yeah.
had. I credit this to him because this is the perfect idea, which is if they ever bring King K. Rool back, it's got to be a Western theme and have him be Cowboy K. Rool, and
Oh.
you could theme the whole DK game around it, where then you're like going in tumbleweeds, or like train rides, and you're like fighting on top of a train, and you could do a whole Western themed DK game, and
Yeah.
like Cowboy K. Rule. And I just think that would be the perfect like personality thing for him to do.
What I was gonna say, if they were doing a third one, I was gonna suggest that you could even have King K. Rool be the boss at the end of every world, and just have him be doing a different gimmick in like each one, if they wanted to commit to that. But I think what you're saying is actually super true. That he has such a strong personality that they could make a full game built around like any kind of archetype that they want to throw King
Mhm.
K. Rool in. They could do like
Yeah,
Western. They could do like a Super Donkey Kong Galaxy and like have him be in a
right,
spacesuit or something like that.
right, right.
Like you can fully commit the Kremlings to being like, you know what, this week we're all being space pirates. Like they're exactly the right attitude to be able to pull that off and not make it feel like too gimmicky or too much like they're chasing a trend or
And
anything.
you can picture him in it, like you said that, and I'm picturing
Yeah.
King K. Rool in a spacesuit. It just makes sense. You just picture him in it,
Yeah,
so
they're just
he could do
such
anything.
good character designs you can do anything with.
Yeah.
I'd say that that's really I like the bosses and like what they did to stand apart in especially Tropical Freeze. I like that whole aesthetic that they really committed to
Hmm.
the ice villains and all that.
Hmm.
Um Tiki guys are all right in
Hmm.
Returns as well, but
Yeah.
I feel like the Kremlings coming back would just yeah, if nothing else, the fandom would lose their mind whenever that got announced during a direct and just
That's to me, that's the piece that's kind of. I mean, I mentioned a few of the other things like the bonus barrels, and lack of animal buddies. There's a few things that I wish they would bring back, but to me, the
mhm.
Kremlings are just kind of part of the identity of DK. Um, And like I said, it just makes more sense now than ever before, I think, to have a return.
The other thing that I would really like for them to kind of bring this back from the original games, I forget exactly how Returns handles it, but I know that in Tropical Freeze, whenever you get like a Kong buddy, which they have multiple in that game, Diddy, Dixie, Cranky Kong, Funky Kong if you're playing the Switch version. Anytime you get a buddy, it's more like you're just powering up DK.
Yeah.
Like DK is getting a Mario power up where he can get hit a few extra times and his jump is getting improved.
Mhm.
Whereas with the original trilogy, especially for starting with Donkey Kong Country 2 is when they really focused on this. You
Yeah.
are playing as two characters.
Yeah.
So they have the differences. You need to choose when to switch between them. There's the different barrels with their faces on it. And then also just like picking up your buddy and throwing them up to get to higher areas and everything.
Yeah.
It'd be really nice if they kind of took the 3D side-scrolling Donkey Kong games and figured out how to translate that back into it, like make the fact you're controlling the two separate characters
Yep.
impactful again.
I agree. And Tropical Freeze like kind of almost touched on that because they had like Cranky Kong with the cane that you could bounce on spikes with,
Mm-hmm.
and Diddy has his jetpack, which is new, which is kind of cool. So he has like a float. Dixie does the thing where she twirls and she can get a little extra lift. So like
Mm-hmm.
they're all a little tiny bit different. But you're right. Single player, it's just a like a power up basically.
Mm-hmm.
When you're playing with two players, you can where they're two separate characters,
Oh
but
yeah,
but
that's
that's not
true
the
for the
same,
co-op.
right? Like
Yeah.
I wish that was available in single player where you could just then play as just Diddy Kong or something. So
Mm-hmm.
they didn't quite have that either. I don't know if you've heard of there's like a fan project called DKC4, and it's a like
Oh.
it's basically a ROM hack of DKC whatever, but they're editing all the levels, and you can play as all four playable Kongs. So you can play as DK, Kitty, Diddy, and Dixie, and they have the tropical freestyle barrel that rotates between them, and you just pick the
Oh,
partner you want.
nice.
And it's a cool idea because
Oh,
it's like you could
I
play a
am
level as
100% checking this out.
Donkey and Kitty, and you could just have combos that you hadn't had before, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that's legit like a dream game in my head of just
Yeah,
like, oh yeah, I want like Donkey Kong and Dixie Kong to be able to go on an adventure together. That's awesome.
there's if you YouTube DKC4, there's a bunch of levels they're showing off. Like it's in development right now. It's kind of like a fan project.
Hmm.
So definitely check it out because even the levels look like they're giving a lot of love and they're really unique ideas. Like there's a construction site level and like there's cool stuff like that where it's really unique. I don't know if
Nice.
it'll like play as well or whatever, but like it's just looks like it's a lot of love given to the series, so it's pretty cool.
No, I'll definitely have to check that out. I was gonna bring up. I know there's an indie game called Windswept. Have you heard of
Oh
that?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I am so excited for that to come out.
I'm very high. Did you play the demo of that?
I haven't yet. I keep
Oh yeah,
meaning to, but
so good.
I just follow mostly been following the project on Twitter. For those watching that
Yep,
don't know, I'll link it in the description.
it's
Their
so
Steam
good.
page, but it's basically pixel 2D platformer, but very much, very obviously, the main inspiration is Donkey Kong Country. Like the way the physics works, the two characters. I think it's a turtle and a duck are the
Yep,
main playable characters.
yeah.
And just yeah, taking that Donkey Kong Country idea and making a unique indie game out of it. Love it. It looks so promising. I can't wait for that game to come out.
It's the closest I've seen of another game really capturing DKC for sure. There's a
Mhm.
few others that have tried. Like there's another good one called Kaze and the Wild Masks.
Yes,
Um,
I haven't played that one, but I've heard decent things.
That one's really good too. It doesn't there's just like a tiny like I'd say it's like 90% there. There's just a couple things missing, but Windswept is the closest I've seen that it seems like it has it all where the movement is amazing, each character controls different and their team up buddy combo stuff is really focused on actually. There's kind of like a lot of stuff you can do of the characters by putting it on your back and then tossing one and it's
Hmm.
it's pretty intricate, which is really cool, but they got all the bonus stuff and like all the things that I said that I loved about DKC2, they really capture that. So yeah,
Yeah.
Windswept is like top of my wish list for sure.
Yeah, every time they post, like, a GIF of just like, "Oh, here's a little bit of the level I'm working on," like, just every time I watch that, I'm like, "That's just Donkey Kong Country. I
I
love
know.
this. I love
It's so
this.
good.
Donkey Kong Country, but pixels. It's so good."
And they've been showing off some animal buddies that they're adding in there too, which
Ah,
in the
nice.
demo it doesn't have any of the animal buddies, but I've seen some stuff on Twitter as well. Yeah, and they have like a chameleon that's an artist. It has a little artist hat, and I think it can like I don't know exactly, but I think it like it does something where it paints pictures and it's part of the gameplay. I don't know how it works
Oh,
yet, but
nice.
they have really cool, unique animal buddies too, which is really cool.
I hear that, like, "Oh, chameleon that can paint stuff." It's like, yeah, that would fit in a Donkey Kong Country.
Right?
Like,
Yeah, yeah, you can
it's
just picture
like,
it.
immediately, yeah.
There's a crab and you're sitting on the crab and then it can shoot water, and this is their squitter equivalent, and it
Oh,
shoots
okay, yeah.
water pillars that you land on. So then it like the crab
Oh,
shoots little
okay.
water pillars and it makes your platforms for you. So they have somewhere, again, it's like a clear inspiration from the animal buddies.
Yeah.
There it's like it's a shameless it's like yes, we are Donkey Kong, but we're going all in.
I absolutely love indie projects like that where they're like,
Yep.
"Yeah, we're gonna be completely honest about it. This is
Yeah.
we just want another Donkey Kong Country game. Nintendo's not doing anything. We're gonna do it."
Exactly. Exactly. We're gonna do it then. I know.
Yeah,
So good.
I love that. Love that attitude. Not to get too far off Donkey Kong Country 2, but I know you have a one of your bigger videos is on Donkey Kong 64. Do you have
Yeah.
any kind of like current day thoughts on that, or just while we're talking about Donkey Kong Country, anything you want to say about
That's
its
a yeah, actually,
Collectatron
that is a
brother?
good question. I It kinda became like a meme for a little bit there. I don't know. I've had things where people send me where the thumbnail of the bad game design of DK64 is like a thing that gets passed around.
Yeah, I think that thumbnail like is almost like a reaction image by this point.
Which is really funny to me.
It's just the chunky Kong and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
like crossed out bad. I love it. It's a good thumbnail. It's
Yes, and so here's what is really funny about that is I started doing some YouTube shorts recently this year, and I repurposed a YouTube short small section of that video.
Mhm,
And what I found is when I first made the video, everyone was like, "Yeah, he's right. Like that game isn't that good. Like, it's kind of like this was a beloved game, and he's pointing out it does have flaws. Like there was new thought." And
mhm.
now I did the YouTube short, and everyone's like, "This guy just like, this game is actually really good, and this guy doesn't even know what he's talking about because like." Everyone always rags on DKC. It's like come full circle where now it's become like the reaction to my original video. Now people think
Yeah,
like
like you were part of that initial wave of like people kind of changing their minds on the game, and now it's the other the other side of it. They're like, hey, why is this guy being a contrarian when he was
exactly, exactly. It's so funny because now everyone's trying to have the opposite feel of it. Like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Here's what I will say about DK64. And I
Mhm,
say this in the video, but people forget because I focus a lot on the negatives at the end. But
mhm,
the personality stuff we were talking about, same exact thing in DK64. Like it
mhm,
exudes so much personality, and besides the gripes that I have, like all the characters and different stuff, and each level being unique, all the things we talked about there, like is exactly the same in DK64. Every new area is like super cool and fun and unique theming, and all the different characters and the bosses and stuff. King K.
mhm.
Rool at some of his best, in my opinion, like in terms of his personality too.
Yes.
DK64, love
Yeah.
K. Rool in 64. Um, yeah, like all the people you meet along the way, and like the freaking whatever, the hippo and elephant or whatever to unlock the boss doors,
Oh my god,
like
yes.
Hotch and Scotch or whatever their names are.
Yeah.
Like they just come up with that stuff. They just have so much like there's no reason for that to be how you open a boss door, but they're like, we're gonna have these like fat animals eat so much bananas that they weigh the scale. Like the personality is insane, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's what it does best. Is that's Rareware at its heyday.
Mhm.
um, I mean, their run on N64 is insane of Rareware. Of like, there was one year in one calendar year, there were like 3 Rareware games that were all mega hits in a single calendar year, which is like insane. Of like, I think it was like Diddy Kong Racing, Banjo Kazooie, GoldenEye, or something like that, where it's like
Yeah.
what were
Just
they on?
back to back bangers.
Rare in the 90s is unbelievable. But I'd be curious if I went back and played it again, how I would feel. I probably would still feel similar in a lot of ways. Where for those that, if you haven't seen the video, basically my biggest gripe is just like there's a ton of backtracking to go get every collectible. You'd have to go back to the tag barrels so many millions of times and go down the same hallways, just to go get the same stuff over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
A good rebuttal to that is that you actually don't need all the collectibles to beat the game. You need like less than half.
Mm-hmm.
So that argument it is really only if you're like in 100% the game. Yes, it's a slog, but that's true of
Mm-hmm.
a lot of games, right? To actually just beat the game, it's very little
Yeah.
that you have to collect. Compare that to say banjo-kazooie, where I think it's like, I don't know, 95% of the collectibles you need to beat the game. It's like
Yeah.
it's very, you need almost all the puzzle pieces and stuff.
Yeah.
um so that's true, and I think that's a fair rebuttal. um what people often will say is, well, if only they had a button to change the kongs on the fly, that would solve the problem. Like if
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have the tag barrels and you just could map a kong to a button and swap or something,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of true. And they actually did make that. There's like a mod of DK64 where they made that basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't played it, but I don't know if that would like fix everything. But
It's pretty funny because it's mostly Zelda randomizers that I focus on, but just being kind of adjacent to the randomizer community, I know that Donkey Kong 64, the last few years, the randomizer of that has kind of taken off
mm,
because they modded that in that you can
yeah,
just switch your Kong whenever. And the combination of randomizing stuff around and like having to refigure out the order you're doing things with just you have all the Kongs from the start. It seems to be like a really interesting like kind of speed running game for people to race the randomizer with. So I haven't played that myself, but I know that that mod has like completely changed some people's opinions of the game, at least from the randomizer perspective. I don't know how much that would impact like the vanilla game design.
yeah. It feels like
Um,
those would go hand in hand, the randomizer and having the kongs. Like that seems like a good combo of ways to
mhm.
do it. Yeah. I haven't done some randomizers. I need to. That would be a good one to like dip my toes in, because like the Zelda ones intimidate me because I'm not like super into.
Mhm.
I don't know the ins and outs of Zelda to know like sequence breaking stuff.
That's the thing with randomizers is it usually has to be a game that you're at least like semi familiar with, or like
Yeah.
at least beat it like when you were a kid or something, and then it
Right.
starts coming back to you. Because if you don't know like how it originally was, it being randomized doesn't really have an impact
Right.
on you.
Right.
But something like Donkey Kong 64 or any of like the collectathon platformers, I
Yeah.
think that stuff gets really interesting.
I guess that I had played a Mario 64 randomizer, and that's pretty fun. Where
Yeah.
the stars are just random all over and stuff. That's pretty cool. They should make a DKC2 randomizer. That's just really what they need to make.
I think I actually saw or downloaded one time a Donkey Kong Country 3 randomizer, but it was basically just it randomized the
Yeah.
orders of the levels. So it was like for speedrunning people that were just bored of doing things in the same order. So it was like,
Yeah, it's
well, we're
not
still
really
doing
the
the same
same.
levels, but I need to actually pay attention to what level I'm entering and stuff.
Three makes a little more sense because at least you have to like go get the items to unlock new areas and stuff like it. Like DKC2 is
Mhm.
more linear, right? You're just going level to level.
Yeah,
Three
yeah,
at least would make more sense.
yeah.
Two wouldn't really make any sense. So DK64, like I said, if I replayed it, I'm sure there'd be things I would like more now and things that I probably would still find annoying. But overall, at the time when I made the video, the really the main argument everyone said is there's just too many collectibles. There's just too many things. And
Mhm.
to me, the point I was trying to make is it's not the number of things, it's like the way it's designed. Because it felt like to me, everything was just behind a lock. It was either like, here's 5 doors, and you have to use the gun of all different 5 kungs to unlock all 5 doors and then do their separate things. And it's just
Mhm.
like, it felt like padding or just kind of like really spreading stuff out just for the sake of having to run back and go do it again and again. So to
Yeah.
me, it was more about the actual design of it rather than just there's too much. But I don't know.
Yeah, it was because there's so many different like kind of keys you have on your tool belt because you've got like
Yeah,
all 5 Kongs guns, all 5 Kongs like instruments,
yeah, the instruments.
the bananas they can pick up, And then so you just have so many different tools, and then they feel a need to like, well, we have all these tools, they need to all be used. So then you just have, yeah, in the random corner of one map, it's like, well, did you remember that Lanky Kong can do this? And you need to bring it over here. And yeah, I really like that game. Same with Banjo-Tooie, where it's again, they're some of my favorites, even if they're not the best, if that makes sense. Like I
Mhm.
personally really like them because they're ambitious and weird, and almost too big. But actually, like playing through them again, or like if I had to 100% them, would be definitely a slog. Yeah.
And that's a good distinction, right? Because I think like a lot of times when we talk about collectathons, people think about 100%. Where if you're
Hmm.
really just doing a casual any percent completion, like most of them are perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong
Hmm.
with all the little things you have to do to 100% a game is totally different. Um,
Hmm.
that it's funny because I don't know if like I spoiled this, but I said in our thing that I could also talk about Banjo Kazooie as another one of my all time faves.
Hmm.
And the reason I love Kazooie the most is actually the size. I like that it's smaller. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
each level just feels. Sorry, we're totally getting like on other games. We're on like the Rareware train.
No, no.
Um,
Rareware deserves the praise.
like Tui to me, too big, too confusing to navigate sometimes, and 64 dips its toes in that. Where
Hmm.
Kazooie, it feels like just the right size, where you can just go through the whole level and you see every corner and you get everything and get out, and it's just each level's boom and you go and move on. Um, that's why I like that. That size to me is the perfect size for a collectathon. Where then they were
Yeah.
experimenting and getting bigger, and it got too big.
Yeah, it's again, it's Banjo-Kazooie, same as Donkey Kong Country 2, is that sweet spot of being,
There
like,
you go. That's a good
ambitious,
point.
pushing things forward, but not being too much to, like, overwhelm people. Whereas, I guess I have a soft spot for these bigger, like,
Yeah.
crazier, Rareware sequels, but I do 100%, like, admit and agree to that, like, Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong Country 2 is probably when they're at their best, when they've
Mm.
found the perfect balance between their ambition and keeping things like understandable and fun to play through, even if you're like 100%ing the entire game.
And when you're making a sequel, you want to do bigger and better. That's the whole point of a sequel, right? So like it
Mhm.
makes sense. Banjo Kazooie is a pretty big game, so Tui of course is going to be much bigger. DKC 2 is a huge expansion of DKZ 1, but 1 was pretty simple, right? It was pretty like
Mhm.
straightforward, smaller, compact. So 2 expanding on it didn't feel too big. You know what I mean? So like it just
Mhm.
there is a sweet spot in there somewhere, but like it makes sense that that's all the progressions of these sequels they make sense. But then
Mhm.
there's just a point where they just it's like we got too big maybe. But
Yeah.
yeah, sweet spots kind of just a good term for I think those games in general.
So let's say um, this Nintendo Direct that just happened, instead of closing out with Metroid Prime 4, they closed out with a Donkey Kong teaser. What we talked a bit about kind of bringing back like the animal buddies. I said bringing back like the dual partner system and making them feel like two separate characters.
Mhm.
Is there anything else that you'd want to see from either a third retro Donkey Kong Country game, or is there any like other Nintendo studios that you'd want to take a crack at the franchise, or what would you want to see from like Donkey Kong Country 6?
Wow, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about the question of like another studio tackling it. That's a good question.
Mm,
Um, I'm not sure. Like in terms of the other stuff, I'd like to see the puzzle piece collectibles in the new games do a good job of giving you things to find in the levels, but I don't
mhm,
find the reward for them as satisfying. It's like you unlock concept art or whatever.
mhm,
Um, so and the way those games do good of having the reward stuff I love by you collect the Kong letters, right? And that unlocks like a final bonus level in a world, and then that unlocks the final world, like their equivalent of Lost World. Like they still have that stuff in Tropical Freeze and Returns. It's just a little bit different.
mhm,
um the bonus barrels only do the puzzle pieces, and like I don't think I've ever collected all the puzzle pieces in Tropical Freezer Returns because I didn't really feel a need to.
mhm,
Because for me it's like the incentive is like if there's more level or more game, right, that's like when I want to do it.
Yeah. Are the bonus stuff locked behind like the Kong letters in
Yeah.
Tropical Freeze? Yes. Yeah.
Which was a big brain shift for me because in the original trilogy, the Kong letters are the ones that don't really matter. It's just lies,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, oh, you actually need to get the Kong letters now, which is kind of cool, I guess. It like gives new life for those things. But um, yeah, I guess it'd be nice if there was like something that's an incentive to drive you forward of all the collectibles. That's more than
Hmm.
just some concept art or some little bonus stuff. Because I like the puzzle pieces in terms of like the little bonus stuff that you do to find goodies,
Hmm.
but
But you want the payoffs to be actually like gameplay related instead of just
right.
like concept art's great. Like I love seeing how these games are made, but yeah, an actual gameplay beneficial goal.
And the concept art is actually kind of cool because it does show off like animal buddies that they tossed around. Like they actually did have ideas for things
Oh,
that got
nice.
cut. I think there was like I think there's like an elephant or like a mole or a gopher thing. I think there's like a few animal buddies that they tossed around but cut. So it is interesting for sure. Um, but I'd love to see those things in the game. You know, it's like bring those back,
Yeah.
the things that you cut.
Let me
Um,
unlock those with the puzzle piece.
yeah, right. So, I don't know, that'd be cool. Here's something that so I've been like tinkering around with Game Maker. I'm by no means anything remotely close to even kind of good at doing game stuff, but I've just been like messing around with my own little prototype thing. And the
Hmm.
idea that I wanted, because I want to make a DKC like game.
Hmm.
Windswept definitely like was cool inspiration too. It's like, yes, like this.
Yeah.
Um, the idea I had, which this would be kind of cool if they did this, would be if you have different animal buddies. The game that I was making it really focus on animal buddies, like have one in every level and have like more to choose from, about 10.
Hmm.
But you could combine two of them together and use their abilities together. So for example,
Okay.
I have a toucan bird that lets you float, similar to Dixie's hair twirl, like a float. And
Mm.
then I have a kangaroo that can do wall jumps, like you can jump off walls, and an extra high jump, kind of, I guess maybe like a rattly, where like a high jump.
Hmm.
But then you can use both of them together, so then you can do wall jumps and float, and so you can like combine them and do different stuff together. So like,
Okay.
what
Yeah.
if you could like mix and match animal buddies and do like different combos of different things together? So
Yeah. Yeah. Having each of the Kongs on like a different buddy, and then you can swap between those or do combo things.
in my head, I'm picturing like a Squitter espresso combo where you can make the platforms, but then you're also crossing big gaps, or like, yeah, Dixie's hair twirl combines with an animal buddy and you can float while also doing a power up or whatever. Like
Hmm.
just some kind of weird like mix and match thing would be really cool.
Yeah. No, there's so many kind of just not unique to Donkey Kong Country, but they're one of pretty unique. Like they're like stuff that they only seem to kind of focus on. That's still, I think, pretty ripe for exploration because we've only gotten like 5 games in
Right.
total, not counting like Game Boy ports and things like that.
Hmm.
So there's still so many like game features that they can add on to and improve or put new twists on, or even just like, yeah, if you gave us like 4 new animal buddies, like that changes things up so much.
Right. Right. I don't know. I guess I'm just picturing like riding Ramby, but then you can like jump and float with him down with something. Like if there's something where
Hmm.
you can add some extra little stuff together with different animal buddies. I don't know. I think, yeah, the animal buddies in general, I think, are just more ways they can explore for sure the series,
Hmm.
because they just feel like little tiny power ups that are just here and gone, and then you just move on.
Yeah.
I think there's more stuff you could dig out of there for sure.
Yeah, definitely a lot of potential. So yeah, I guess is there any kind of closing thoughts or like ideas about Donkey Kong Country 2 that we didn't get to that you'd like to share with the audience?
I do love the bosses. We didn't really mention the bosses too much. I feel like any of the Donkey Kong Country bosses are not like the highlight of the series necessarily for people. A lot of
Hmm.
them, especially like DKC 1, obviously they're like super simplistic.
Hmm.
Um, but the ones in 2, speaking of like just elevating the series and making it a good sequel, like the bosses in 2 are really cool and a good step
Hmm.
up. Cleaver, the sword in the lava world one,
I love
uh,
that one.
is
Yeah.
just like, I mean, talk about because one, it's expanding that stuff into vertical, so it's using the hooks and you're jumping around, but it's like way more intimidating, right? The the bosses in DKC one are just big versions of regular enemies. So it's just like I'm
Yeah.
jumping on another beaver, you know. But then this is like a sword with like eyes, and it's this evil thing, and you see like the lava hand come out to hold the sword, right? So you think like, oh, the boss is this lava monster holding a sword, but then it breaks free and the sword is actually the boss, not the hand. And it's like, whoa, like
Yeah.
it's the sword. And so the bosses, I think, are a really cool expansion in two. And
Yeah.
three actually has really cool bosses also.
Yeah.
Um, I like the mech boss in three is really cool. So there's a lot of really good boss. Actually, you know, one of my favorite bosses in the whole series is Belcha in DKC three,
Oh, yeah, the big barrel dude.
because talk about a unique way to kill him. You know, you feed him the bugs and he burps and goes like that's
Mhm.
so cool. I've never seen another boss like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Bring back Belcha. I love
Yeah,
Belcha.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, forget everything I said
Um,
about in the next DKC returns. We're bringing back Belcha. That's what we need.
there we go. It's actually I've seen people complain that a lot of the Donkey Kong Country bosses are basically waiting around until you get the
Mhm,
moment to hurt them
mhm,
type thing.
mhm,
But I've never seen why that's really a bad thing because it's focusing on the game's strengths. Like you're maneuvering around the space, you're having to dodge everything, and it's
mhm.
like, okay, you've successfully dodged all this stuff. Now you can progress to the next phase of the boss fight.
Yeah,
Um, I guess I can see how that could be annoying if you're retrying the same boss over and over, but
yeah,
that's kind of the point is you're like learning these patterns, you're memorizing them,
yeah.
and you're like, okay, learning how to dodge these things over and over and getting better at your control.
Well, you said it exactly right. It's playing to the game's strengths. If
Mhm.
in DKC two you have a Mega Man style boss, it wouldn't make any sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
To Diddy with a gun or something, and you're slowly chipping away at his health. It just doesn't make sense. Where you
Mhm.
know you hit him three times or whatever, and you're moving on. It is kind of Mario ish, where you know Mario bosses are the same way, where it's not like they're always necessarily the highlight of the game, but it plays to the strengths. Like it's the platforming, it's the bouncing and the jumping, and
Mhm.
so like probably the one of the worst or hardest bosses in the game is the second bird fight, where he's the ghost bird in the forest,
Yes, yeah.
and that one's really tough if you don't know what you're doing, because this is what you were saying of you hit him once and then it moves on and you go to the next area and
Mhm.
you're climbing the ropes and he throws the eggs down at you, and that can be really hard and frustrating if you're like newer player.
Mhm.
um so so it's not like they're all winners, but the King K. Rool fight in 2 is
Mm.
probably one of the best fights in the entire series.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Speaking of like sweet spot.
I love how they escalate that for the hidden like final boss,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
even tougher version of it, where it's like, okay, you mastered the first version of him. Can you do this fight again where he's doing like everything twice as fast and just like way little downtime?
yeah, yeah. Yes, and the second fight in the volcano. You only hit him once. It's like a final attack. It's like just a big onslaught of everything,
Yeah,
and it just feels so cool. It's like it doesn't drag on forever. It's not like a insanely harder one necessarily. It's kind of just like a fun cap to the experience, and
yeah, just
I just think
one
it's
last
perfect.
little test of like, remember this? Remember how
Yeah,
you fought him before?
yeah,
Here's just the one last push. It's
exactly.
really good.
Yeah. So, you know, the bosses are good. Again, it's like the thing I always hear is like, oh, they're just bigger versions of regular enemies, which is true in the first one, but they make really good unique ones in the second and third game for sure.
Hmm.
I mean, I
Yeah,
guess like some of them are like the spiny guy in DKC three, that's the underwater thing
yeah.
with Unguard, but you know, for the most part, there's some really unique, cool bosses for sure.
I get a kick out of the beavers in the first one, just the
Yeah,
uh.
yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
and some of those are still fun. Like Dumb Drum's kind of a fun fight. Like it's
yeah.
not hard or anything, but it's like it's kind of a unique take.
Yeah, just a little
Um,
enemy gauntlet. It's
right, right. And the K. Rool fight in the first game, again, like I love it for the music, kind of like what you're saying. It's not like the fight
Mhm.
necessarily is the best fight, but the music really elevates it.
The King K. Rool fight at the end of the first game is very much just like memorizing what he does, because it's always like, okay, and now 3
Yeah,
cannonballs come down
yeah.
and he'll run. But it's just, yeah, learning that. It's got a great music happening. I love the little credits fake
I
out.
was just gonna say the credits thing is what makes that fight super cool, because that's
Yeah,
like the first game I've ever seen that did that little credits
yeah.
fake out.
That boss fight, you can like see Rareware like kind of poking through with a little bit more personality than they've been showing the rest of the game, and then
Yeah.
just, yeah, with Donkey Kong Country 2, they took that to the sweet spot.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. That's why I love that game. It's it's just the right. Yeah. It's like infinitely replayable. I mean, that's just going to be the game that I will always come back to and I can always replay a million times.
Yeah, just so easy to sink back into, and just, yeah, before you know it, you're at the end of the final world again.
And it's got the different styles for whatever you want. If you want 100% it, great, and there's that bonus content. But if you want to just breeze through and speed through it regular as well, you can do that too. So it's just there's different ways to play it.
So yeah, with all that being said, I really enjoyed this conversation. It was very fun to talk about a lot of Rareware games, but
Yeah.
they're really cool company, and I think it's actually cool to kind of like bounce back and forth between their different games and like what they did well in certain ones and less well in others, but just all the while having that personality really shine through, because Rare in the Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64 era, just chef's kiss.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think you appreciate the certain games in the context of the other games they made too, right? So,
Hmm.
knowing that that's where they came from, and like I said, just especially seeing the progression to 3, and they add in more open world collectible stuff, and you really just see where they go, their mindset and their game design. You see it evolve over all those games, so it
Mhm.
is pretty
Just
cool.
so, if the people at home wanted to find you, where can they find you on the internet?
I'm on youtube.com/snowman gaming. That's me. I've been we were we were saying at the start, we've been doing this a long time. I've had a channel for over 10 years now, but I haven't had a lot of time to make videos, but this is the perfect time to do this because I'm coming back for the summer of Snowman. We're doing some
Ooh,
videos this summer, which is good.
nice! It's very exciting.
Yeah, and in a way that's kind of nice because now it's like I have a year's worth of games to talk about for the summer. It's like here's my
Yeah.
experience of the games I played this last year instead of like little videos along the way. I just have some good stuff to pull from in the summer, so I have time now to make videos. Yay!
Woo! No, that's awesome. I'm very much looking forward to it. Um, yeah. Anyone watching, if you're watching this video, you know where to find me. Josh Busker everywhere. So thank you all for watching. Thank you, Snowman, for being an awesome guest. And yeah, I will see you guys all next week, and have a good one. Bye bye, y'all.
Bye.